Hey there, welcome to today's episode. We're going to do a general overview for beginners about sample layering. Showed you in the simultaneous play episode, we can sample layer by linking pads together. So as I trigger one pad, it can trigger another or multiple other pads. So that's one way to sample layer. But when you want full and complete control, it's better to do that via track edit. I'm going to be using drums in this demonstration, but of course this can be for any sample, anything that you like. I've loaded up 3 drum sounds into a drum track. And I also loaded one sound into the sample pool. Now, if you don't understand the sample pool, check out the sample pool episode because that will really help you out. But whenever you want to do your sample layering to call up the samples to use, they need to be assigned to pads, or they at least need to be in the sample pool. They have to be a part of the project. I'll show you that as we go through, but hopefully that makes sense. So we only have one track, our 3 drum sounds. We want to start doing some sample layering. We're going to go to track edit, which is this little icon here. I have mine set up in the sidebar. You might find yours in the menu options. Let's open up track edit. We want to jump over to the first tab of samples. You'll notice there's multiple tabs. We did this in the track edit overview, but we're going to go to samples. And here we can see our sample layers. Got our samples laid out. We can see the waveform. Let's just stay with the kick drum. I'm going to use a couple of random examples because I need samples that are completely different so that you can hear what's going on. Ideally, sometimes for like hip hop, maybe you want to layer 2 kick drums to make them thicker or do something like that. That's one use for this. And what you'll hopefully notice is the first thing we come to across the top of the screen, or at least underneath the waveform, is that we have 8 sample slots. So for every pad, you can stack 8 samples, which is pretty crazy. I've never done that. I think maybe at a push, I might have used 4 on one pad layer, but I've never really done that. I've never got to 8 sample layers. It's just never happened. But if you need to, that's what you can do with the MPC. I'm going to go with this kick drum, and I'm just going to move over to layer 2 because that's all we really need to do. We want to add another layer. To do that, we go to sample underneath, but this is where what I mentioned before comes into play. So if the sample is assigned to a pad somewhere or it's loaded into the sample pool, I'll be able to find it in this menu by scrolling through. This is the extra sample, and I brought in a crash cymbal, just something completely different to a kick so that you'll be able to hear the difference nice and easily. But that's what's here. I could also choose the hi-hat, the same kick drum, and the same snare drum, but we're going to choose this one. And that's all you have to do. There are other options. We're going to go through those in future episodes, but for now, really, that's the basics of it. We just select another layer, and now when I press my kick drum, you can hear we have a kick drum and a crash cymbal. Where it gets really interesting and exciting is because we have all the parameters for the sample to tweak, and then we get into our samples tabs under here. So as we scroll through, the next one is where we start to see these layers and we have independent control. We can start messing around with this. Now, if you've gone to the trouble of stacking 8 layers, 8 samples, you'll notice you can only see 4 here in a vertical row. But if I click on this, you will get to the other 4. So that's how you see those. If you are using 8 sample layers, good luck to you, then you can do that. You can see all of them. We're just dealing with these 2 layers at the top for today. The Q links are still active here, and I like to use the Q links, so I'm going to highlight the first part just to show you. The first thing is pitch control, so pitch for the independent sample layers. Nice and simple. If we pitch the crash cymbal, you're going to hear the difference. Could play around with that. Then we've got our fine tuning. We're not going to go through all of these, just a brief overview, some of the ones that I think are most important. But we could fine tune on an independent layer. And then we could also change the volume. So the crash cymbal might be a little loud. We could come in and fine tune the volume. If we move over, then you could start panning the individual layers. If we move over to the next tab, we get this offset. So offset allows us to kind of move the position of those samples. Currently, with them both set, it's 0 and 0. They're playing at exactly the same time. The only thing you would have to watch out for is that the sample itself doesn't have any dead space at the beginning, because sometimes sample packs you might find that there might be a little bit of dead space. But with these 2 samples, I'm pretty sure they're triggering at exactly the same time and they're pretty much lined up. If you want to, though, you can start playing around with that. Now, you might not notice a lot at first. Start moving that one, but as I move the kick drum back, all of a sudden we're hearing that gap. Now, that's to the extreme, but it just means you can line those samples up with greater detail. We can double tap these and just go back to 0. just for now, keep them lined up. You get into your velocity. Now we have velocity control for the independent layers. We're going to cover that in another episode, so this doesn't get too deep. But then you can start playing around with velocity starts, velocity ending, things like that. We'll talk more about that in future episodes so that it doesn't get too confusing. We're going to move over to the last tab in this little series, and we have a bunch of other options. This is randomization, which is really cool. So if we move back to the first one, it's pitch. If I just crank this up to 100, and this is still on the crash cymbal layer, we're going to hear just random pitches as we trigger the sample. Pretty cool. You get the idea. We can dial that all the way back to 0 and move over. We'll only take a look at a couple of these, but another one would be level. It's the volume, and it's going to do exactly the same thing. If I crank this thing up, we're just going to get different volume levels every time we trigger the sample. You might have to run through it a few times, but you can hear it. It's kind of getting quieter or it's getting louder. And you have the same for panning. You have the same for your offset, even attack, decay, that sort of thing. So lots of stuff that you can mess around with here. Highly recommend checking it out and experimenting for yourself, but we will be coming back throughout the course of this series. See you guys in the next one.